Welcome back to the Clack Shack, guys, and as promised yesterday, finished all the burn for my project that I got going. Now, this isn't part of it. This is my jig adapter, and I decided to do something different on my jig adapter, guys. I doubled mine up and made it a lot more, a lot thicker, a lot stronger. So I got to put that back on there now that the laser's empty and doesn't have anything running, but we'll put that over to the side for now. But this is it, guys. I got a whole bunch of parts here, and all these parts that I've cut out will be going together to make a holder for displaying some of my work that I recently got a new customer, and I'm going to be putting some keychains and fridge magnets and stuff like that, like some little tourist souvenir type stuff in a store. And they wanted a carousel display that would turn, and being that, you know, this is a pretty big customer, and I figured might as well. And I have taken my KCup caddy that some of y'all may be familiar with, and I have retrofitted to work for holding key rings. And I had to glue these together, so I went ahead and did that so the glue would set. But just to give you an idea, this thing holds 8 panels, and each panel is going to have a different job. I've got, and that's the way that these will kind of hang on there like so. I've got 4 panels that'll be holding keychains, and I've got 4 panels that'll be holding the fridge magnets. And what I did, let me find a magnet here. What I did is I've taken the panels, and I got over on the bandsaw there, and I cut me some small thin pieces of metal to fit these panels, and that way the magnet will be able to secure the piece to the metal plates. And there's going to be 4 of these and 4 of the ones for the keychain, and I'm going to alternate them so that people can see, no matter which way it's turned, that it has both magnets and keychains on there to kind of provoke them to turn it. So that's kind of the way this thing is laid out. And for those of you that have ever seen my KCup holder, it goes together basically the same way as in the video that I did for the KCup holder. But if you'll give me just a minute, I'm going to get the glue out, get everything opened up and ready to go, and I'll show you how this thing goes together, and then we'll progress to the point to where the final touches are being put on it. So stick around for a minute. And by the way, I do have a microphone ordered, and it should be here before too long. So if the cicadas outside are still messing with you and you can still hear them, I apologize. And I don't know how the audio is going to sound. I'm using my new Nikon. The Clack Shack got a bit of an upgrade if you didn't notice that video. But I've got the Nikon set up. It seems to be working pretty well. I was pleased with the video last night. Still trying to learn the settings because it's a little different than the GoPro. The GoPro is kind of like deploy and forget about it. So I'm having to put a little more work into this. But once I get the microphone, I think it'll be better. So the way that this thing works is these panels all connect to this. This is the core piece that holds all this together. And so the first step is each one of these little panels, they all have these little dog ears that come off the bottom of them, and that contacts that center panel. So what you've got to do is put just a small amount of Titebond 3 there, and I'll show you the glue. I'll put a link in the description if you decide you want to use this glue. I use Titebond on all my wood stuff, whether it's laser engraving or making cutting boards or stove covers or whatever. I go through this stuff. They even sell it by the gallon so you can refill your bottles. So it's a really handy glue. It doesn't take a whole lot of time to set, and when it does set, it's there. It's not going to come loose. Now, I will tell you before we go into this, I have assembled several of these. I've sold hand to hand. I've sold probably 5 of my KCup caddies, and putting them together by yourself is a bit challenging. So, what are you doing? Callie, you can't be over here, bud. Alright, so the first thing is each one of these has to sit on this base, the base panel here. And the way that I'm doing this is there's going to be 4 of the hooks and 4 of the other ones that are made for the magnets. This piece here is what holds these 2 guys together. So what you've got to do is put that in the slot, and then if you'll press up against the side of, press that board up against this one, it holds that board in place. And then you just have to get another one. And once you get a few of these things in, it'll get easier, because the wood and the panels actually start holding this thing centered so that it doesn't move on you. And I'm trying not to put any of these in upside down, but I'm afraid it's going to happen before I'm done here. So I've got 3. Once I get this 4th one in, it ought to hold everything together pretty good for me. Making sure I got them all upright, because I've got a bottom and I've got a top. And I do not want to have half of them pointing one way and half pointing the other. So I have a little issue getting this one in there. It's going to be tight. That last one, when you put it in there, it's going to kind of snap in. So now that I got 4 of them in there, that should hold that together for me for a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and put the top cap piece on so that it kind of holds them together, and go ahead and let that glue start setting. And the way that works is same technique. It's just you got to kind of push them in there. One thing that is helpful, and if you build stuff with a laser and you don't have these in your shop, you're missing out. Well, just don't have rotten ones. Let me bring my box over here. It's about time to go get some new rubber bands. But I take these rubber bands and I use them on a lot of my little builds and glue ups to hold everything together until I can get my hands free. So what I do is I just take and put those in there, run that rubber band across the top. That kind of keeps this part from doing the splits and falling apart while I'm putting the rest of the panels on there. So, add rubber bands to the list of things that you should have. These are going to go in between the keychain ones. And like I said, this thing's going to get a little tight, so because the tolerances are pretty tight on this burn. And this is the 4.8, that thicker wood that I wound up getting that I'm not crazy about. I had to add a few extra passes to get it to cut it, because this was actually originally a 4.5 millimeter design. And luckily I didn't have to change any of the measurements. Everything still works, but this stuff is like 4.8, 4.7, 4.8 millimeters. You'll notice that these don't already have the metal on them. I just did the one with the metal on it for demonstration, but I was a little worried that if I broke something, I might have to attach my metal, and so I just waited on the rest of them. I did the one for demo, and then the rest of them I'm just going to hold off until I get everything together. And what I've got on here is the metal is attached with it's a 3M adhesive. It's like a tape, but it's almost like rubber or chewing gum, and that stuff, man, I use it on different things, and it holds really well. If there's ever anything that I can't get to stay where I want it, I break that stuff out, as long as I've got the room for it to be there. But you just walk around and just keep snapping these guys in. Like I said, it's a little tight, so you may have to press down on them to get them to go in. And then once you get it down all the way, it should just lock underneath this one on the top. And it won't be but a few more seconds here. I'm going to have to take the rubber band out and put the locking ring on there, because it is getting snug. The more of these I put in, the tighter it gets. So go ahead and put this last one in here. And like I said, this thing started out life as a KCup carousel for Keurig cups. My wife has been wanting one, and so this last one's going to be a booger. My wife had been wanting a KCup carousel, but she didn't like the ones that you can buy at the store, so I had to come up with a way of making one. I may actually have to have something to pry with on this one. This one's tight. And the reason is as you add these, it's putting pressure. The other ones are all pulling against each other. So it's putting pressure against this locking ring. And you want the locking ring to be tight because that's what holds this thing together. I really don't want it to be that tight, but like I said, this wood's a little bit thicker than what I typically use. So there we go, there we go. I just had to get a little man up on it a little bit. And now that one should pop in. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the rubber band off, and I'm gonna go ahead and work this other locking ring on here. This ring basically is a clone of the one that's on the bottom. Same principle. It just has little fingers that are specifically measured to put pressure on the back of these panels and act as a clamp while the glue dries. But they do stay in place once you get this thing assembled, and they provide extra extra pressure to hold everything together. And you just kind of got to walk around and get these things locked in, and then pull that locking ring around the top of them. But it is tight, guys. The tolerances on this is very tight. A little plastic pry bar, so maybe I won't chip any wood in the process. But this one's a little snug. Like I said, originally I designed this thing for 4.5, so it's a little tighter than usual. And I'm tired of playing with it, so give me a little bar here. Kind of get these other ones to go ahead and go into position. And then once that happens, there should be no danger of this thing moving. Here we go. That's when you know it's tight, when it squeaks. That's tight tolerances. Alright. So now I've got that on there. And this is going to be the top, and the reason that I know is because my hooks are going to sit like this to hold the keychains. Alright, so I'm going to have a keychain there and keychain there. So I need those hooks to be up. And for this design, the way that I'm wanting it to work is I'm wanting it to spin, but I want the pin to come all the way out the top, so that I can put my logo on the top. So I'm going to flip this guy over. This is going to be the base. This is going to be the bottom of the display. And on the bottom of the display, this piece that has a hole in the center goes on here. And the reason it has a hole in the center is because the rod that holds this contraption together has to go through this piece in order for this thing to spin. So what I'm going to do, and you're going to want to put the glue on this part of the build, and just a little bit around this locking ring, just to make sure it doesn't pop out later on if somebody were to pick it up by it or something like that. And just put a good coat, just a good thin coat of glue on that. And once you get the glue on, you'll pop that bottom plate on here, and what that'll do is that's trapping those little sideboards in between all these pieces that are being put together here. So get that glue on there. Let me get me a rag. And then this piece lines up with the first piece that you put on the locking ring. It just lines up with it. You got to make sure everything's lined up right. And once it gets lined up, put you a couple of clamps on that. And if you don't have clamps, I recommend clamps. I mean, you don't have to have them. If you didn't have clamps, you could just put a heavy weight on this and let it sit for several hours, and that would be adequate. But I prefer to clamp it once I get it put together. And you don't want to over tighten these. You just want to get them down real snug. You'll see the glue will try to kind of squish out from between there when you tighten these guys down. And you'll see the glue kind of push out. And when that happens, just take your little rag there and just wipe off the excess so you don't have a big pile of glue laying everywhere. Not to mention it'll get all over you. But wipe the glue off that's extra, and pretty much that piece just needs to sit and kind of chill for a little while. So I'm going to flip this back over, and that's what it's going to look like from the top, from here down. Now, this is what will make this thing turn. The center holes in the caddy are really snug on this rod. So, and all this is a piece of wood dowel that you can get at most any hardware store. I use wood dowels a lot in my builds. And the smaller the build, I go into using toothpicks and whatnot. Some of y'all may be aware of that. And so what I'm doing here is under the bottom where it comes out, and I'll show you this, where it comes out of the bottom at, I'm just leaving enough that I can go through the piece of wood that I'm going to use as a base. I want that to be able to go through there, and this is going to be my base. This is a piece of water oak that was taken out by a thunderstorm less than a quarter of a mile from here. It was a big water oak tree. I went and got it, and it was laying on the edge of the road, and the county was bush hogging around it, and so I figured I'd do them a favor and get it out of their way, and so I brought it home and made some lumber out of it. But that's going to be the base of this, and I'll go ahead and kind of let you see the aesthetic without, of course you're not going to have the clamps on there, but that is going to be how this thing is set up. Now I'm going to have one more locking plate that goes up here. Another thing is I have here, these are two spacers. All they are is little donut shaped pieces of wood. And what they'll do is on this bottom right here, when I put a hole in this and put that dowel into this piece of wood, those just give it a space so that this thing can turn without everything sticking together, because you want a little bit of a gap so that when you turn this, those kind of act like washers to allow it to turn a little more freely. Because this pin eventually in here, this pin right here will get to where, right now, I mean, it's pretty stiff, so there's a little bit of a little bit of pressure to it. But as it twists a little while, it will actually wear into this dowel ever so slightly. And what that will do is it'll make it, and I actually, once I get it put together, I spin it a little bit to go ahead and create that wear. But what that does is that allows it to spin on this dowel, but not wobble and not be trying to fall all over the place. And so the one thing that I realized when I decided to bring this all the way up so I could put my Clack Shack logo up here was that in doing so, in my original design, this little tiny hole right here, what you would do is you would take a oscillating saw and cut this dowel off even with the top, place this on there, and then put a tiny screw in that hole into the top of this dowel to hold everything together. But because I want my logo on the top of the stick, I need a bigger hole here. And I'm going to be honest with you, I'm thinking seriously about doing it with a drill, but I really don't want to. So I'm going to move over to the D1 for just a second. I'm going to make this hole ever so slightly bigger, and then I'll start the video back and we'll show you what we got going on over here. Hey guys, I had a thought that while I was doing this hole here, I would do a little training for some of you. I've seen a lot of people asking about how you get something centered and do it without a whole lot of hassle. This is just kind of a little shortcut method that I use. What I'm going to do is I've got my material placed in here, and I've got it on the bed, and I'm going to zoom way in until I get to where I can see that little tiny spot that's in the middle of that thing. On the left side of your screen, you'll see a little icon that looks kind of like the Google Maps pin drop, and what that does is that moves the laser to the position that you click. And so I'm going to click the center of that little circle on my screen here, and I'm going to make that laser move to that location. Now if my camera is close, that should get me relatively where I want it to be. It's a little off, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to move down just a little bit, and I'm going to just click the mouse again to get it to move to the next location, which is going to be just a little bit of an adjustment. All right, and I'm gonna drag her on down a little more. I'm just going to keep clicking down while I'm zoomed in really tight until I get that crosshair exactly in the center of that little tiny circle. And once I do, okay, it is perfectly centered in the circle. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that little circle that I built. I'm just going to select it, and on the top right corner of your screen, you'll see a crosshair that has like a little red dot in the middle of it. And what that says is move to laser position. If you click that, it's going to move the circle that I made. It moves it to where the laser is, and when it moves it, it's going to center it. So it just centered my little circle where I want it. So I'm just going to frame that out just to make sure, because you know sometimes things don't go your way. And we're ready to burn this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and knock this hole out a little bigger so that that dowel will fit all the way through it, and won't have to worry about it hitting. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that guy out right there, and I'll let you see what it looks like once it finishes and show you how precise our aiming was on that one. Well, there you go, guys. That is how accurate that method of aiming is. Alright guys, I'm going to add power supply to the things I need for the Nikon, but what I did while y'all are away is I drilled the hole through the base board here, and I put a little glue in that hole, and I'm just driving this dowel down in that hole. This is the dowel that will allow this thing to spin, and I've got the two spacers under there as well. So once I get this put on here, it'll let it spin, and as I turn it and as it gets used, it will get to where it spins a little more freely. But I don't want it to where it just turns on its own. But this way it turns a little more freely when you're trying to turn it. So that is the basic principle behind the way that this is going to work. And it's about as homemade as it gets. So, and just so you get one more little visual here, you got that going there and that going there. So those will be hanging. Many of them will be hanging off of this, and then I'll have the area here to where the magnetic ones. It won't be one of these, but it'll be a similar magnetic will hang from there. The only thing I got left to figure out is how I'm going to go about putting the Clack Shack logo up here. If I want to do a box, a triangle, or just do a circle and have a front and back of this thing, I really haven't figured that out yet. But anyway, I appreciate you stopping by, and if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, and if enough people would like to have this to be able to make your own displays for your stuff, let me know in the comments, and I'll see about trying to get it put on my Etsy store. So have a good day.